Something remarkable was hiding in plain sight when a collector reached for his 2002 penny and noticed Lincoln's profile splitting in half like a magic trick gone wrong. That unexpected stray in his change jar didn't promise a fortune at first glance, just a humble copper disc bearing the familiar visage of our 16th president. Yet when he held it under a magnifier, what should have been a crisp, single-image portrait fractured into two distinct layers, as if history itself had stamped a secret code. Today, we're peeling back the curtain on these underrated treasures and revealing why a few stray cents from 2002 are sending experienced collectors into a frenzy. Before we dive into the quirks and values, let me take you down memory lane. In 2002, the U.S. Mint was still perfecting the post-1982 copper-plated zinc planchet introduced a generation earlier. Lincoln's bicentennial presence on our 1-cent pieces had become so routine that spotting anything unusual felt like discovering a lost chapter in a familiar book. That year's pennies carried the shield reverse for the first time, marking a modern icon for unity. Each struck disc was meant to bear flawless imagery on both sides, but as minting speed increased to meet global demand, the process occasionally threw a curveball. Blank sometimes misaligned, color seams shifted, and pressure variations caused the die's deepest grooves to register twice, giving birth to the split or double die varieties we'll explore. These anomalies weren't intentional, they slipped through quality control before someone realized what landed in their pocket. The hallmark of a rare 2002 double-die penny lies in that unmistakable, off-center mirror of Lincoln's bust. Tilted under bright light and you'll see two chins, two coats of hair, and two edges of his profile, each layer slightly askew. The gap between those images measures anywhere from half a millimeter to over a millimeter, depending on how much metal shifted during striking. Next to the obverse oddity, some specimens exhibit doubling around the date and mint mark, but it's the portrait that steals the show. These features set them apart from the common, zinc Canadian loonies, and ordinary cast-off cents we drop into tip jars. Finding crisp doubling at the mold center, rather than just along the rim, confirms a serious variety that seasoned numismatists hunt down at shows and online auctions. So, what does that rarity translate to in cold, hard cash? At recent auctions, select specimens in heavily circulated grades, where Lincoln's face shows minor wear but the doubling remains distinct, are fetching between $150 and $300. As grade improves, prices leap dramatically. Mint state examples graded MS65 by PCGS or NGC can command $800 to $1,200, while flawless MS67 pieces have topped $2,500 when a major collector competes. The auction record for a deeply split MS67 2002 D penny sits around $3,300, sold in early 2024 to a bidder who prized the clarity of the doubled bust and the pristine copper sheen. These figures underscore how condition and eye appeal influence a coin's perceived worth. The more your specimen glitters under a loupe, the more bidders will push the price skyward. Beyond their monetary value, these 2002 doubles carry stories that add color to any display cabinet. One collector found his error under a restaurant table and swapped it for everyday change, unaware of its potential until a YouTube video later identified it as a prized variety. Another discovered 4 of them in a single roll purchased from a bank, a remarkable 1 in 30 million strike rate that still boggles the mind. The most intriguing tale involves a Pennsylvania railroad engineer who, in 2002, used one of these pennies to test the lubrication on a model locomotive's axles, and inadvertently preserved a near-perfect example sealed under layers of oil and grime until its unearthing 2 decades later. Value can swing wildly based on condition. In well-worn, circulated grades where the doubling shows but the fields are scuffed, you might slip these into your collection for as little as $80 to $120, banking on a later upgrade if you find a sharper strike. Mid-grade pieces, $50 to $58 Australian dollars, with strong detail and only light evidence of handling sell for $300 to $500, striking a balance between affordability and visual pop. Mint state examples, MS60 and above, shift into premium territory, and prices climb steeply per grade level. High-grade PCGS MS65 copies routinely break the $1,000 mark, while MS-66 is a true unicorn that can clear $2,000 at auction, if one surfaces at all. With those split designs and the trickle-down of minting quirks behind us, the 1983 penny rushes into view with its copper-plated mysteries ready to steal your attention. Just as Lincoln's doubled bust unveiled hidden drama in those 2002 cents, the 1983 penny harbors its own mysteries that are easy to overlook. Hold one upside down beneath your loupe, and you might spot a copper core peeking through the zinc plating, or discover that a mint-made scratch oddly spells out S on the reverse. Behind its common appearance lies a tale of metallurgical growing pains, and a handful of misstrikes that have seasoned collectors and bankroll guardians whispering excitedly at coin shows. Back in the early 1980s, soaring copper prices forced the U.S. Mint to shift from solid bronze planchets to a lightweight sandwich, a thin shell of copper-plated zinc around a core that was 97.5% zinc. Production ramped up dramatically by 1983, with billions of pieces needed for vending machines, payphones, and parking meters nationwide. Quality control procedures were still settling into this new process when the Mint introduced the Lincoln Cents reverse design change, swapping the wheat ears for a trio of interlocking wheat stalks around the denomination. That fusion of a fresh reverse and untested blanks proved to be a recipe for error, and a surprising number of 1983 cents left the press with flaws that only the keenest eye, or an informed collector, could appreciate. The most coveted variety from that year is the so-called 1983 double die obverse, a misregistration that produces a faint echo of Lincoln's hair ribbon, cheekbone, and the beginning strokes of Liberty. Unlike the dramatic doubling seen on earlier classic errors, this one is subtle, sometimes only a millimeter-wide ghost image that demands patience and the right lighting to confirm. There are also thin planchet issues, where insufficient copper cladding results in large patches of silvery zinc showing through the outer shell. And then you have the stunner, a rare off-center strike combined with a clipped planchet, giving one side of the coin a ghostly crescent edge and a tilted reverse scene that looks almost surreal. These features drive rarity and thrill. Collectors prize the double die pieces because the Mint never officially recognized the variety, so no registry sets, and only a handful ever appear at auction each year. When they do, values depend heavily on clarity. A faint example graded AU details might fetch $75 to $120, while a crisp MS-65 could soar to $600 or more when bidders spot that symmetrical doubling along Lincoln's jawline. Auction records for top specimens run north of $900 when someone uncovers a fully mirrored ear, jaw, and date that practically jumps off the surface. Broken planchet and thin-clad pennies appeal to a different crowd, often those who love the chemistry of minting errors. A standard thin planchet piece in circulated condition might trade for around $20 to $30, but flawless mint state examples, where the copper layer peels back evenly, leaving a glimmer of zinc beneath, can climb into the low hundreds. For off-center strikes, the premium depends on how much of the design is missing. Pieces clipped at the rim by 5% command $50 to $80, while dramatic 25 to 30% clips like a coin half moon can command $200 to $350 in higher grades. Beyond numbers, stories add that sparkle you don't see on grading slabs. One dealer stumbled onto a roll of 1983 cents that were still magnetically attractive, proof the copper plating was so thin that magnets clung to the zinc core. Another collector amassed over 30 thin-clad varieties by simply sorting change at the checkout counter. A particularly memorable find came when a coin-op mechanic discovered a 1983 off-center penny embedded so deep in a parking meter mechanism that it had to be pried out with pliers, its rim sliced and bent but doubling perfectly preserved. Condition plays the starring role in value swings. Heavy wear can obscure subtle doubling entirely, knocking a potential $600 coin down to a $20 curiosity. Mid-grades with gentle circulation but sharp doubling land in a sweet spot of $150 to $250, providing both aesthetic appeal and investment potential. Mint state really separates the hobbyists from the speculators. MS-64 pieces might hover around $400, while a true blue ribbon MS-67 example, if someone ever submits one, could rewrite auction records and fetch the sort of five-figure sum usually reserved for 18th-century rarities. Every time you sift through a jar of Lincoln cents, remember that 1983 isn't just the year of the zinc penny. It's a snapshot of a mint in transition, grappling with new materials and unearthing hidden gems that waited decades for someone to appreciate their quiet elegance. As those bright copper shells spin in trays and coin folders, a few will whisper stories of metal science mishaps, misaligned strikes, and the thrill of discovering something rare in the clatter of everyday change. And that's the real magic these pennies offer to anyone willing to look a little closer. Now, leaning back from the zinc-plated puzzles of 1983, let's wind the clock to 1969 and uncover why a penny from that year can still stop seasoned collectors in their tracks. The late 60s were a time of bold change, on Earth, in space, and even at the mint. Amidst moonshot fever and social upheaval, the U.S. Mint quietly continued striking Lincoln cents, this time featuring the now familiar memorial reverse that debuted a decade earlier. Yet in that very year, a handful of dies slipped through quality control, leaving behind a treasure trove of doubling, misstrikes, and mint mark mayhem waiting to be claimed. In 1969, pennies were still solid bronze, 95% copper, 5% zinc, so each cent carried a satisfying heft and deep reddish-brown luster. Most bore a crisp Lincoln head on one side and the solemn obverse view of the Lincoln Memorial on the back. But for a tiny fraction, something went awry during striking. The most celebrated of these is the 1969 double die obverse, a dramatic ghost image that duplicates Lincoln's jawline, cheekbone, and even the fine strands of hair across his forehead. Rather than a subtle echo, this one looks like a twin etched adjacent to the primary portrait, separated by a clear ridge of metal. It's unmistakable once you know what to look for. Collectors also chase the rarer 1969 S repunched mint mark. On proof-only coins from San Francisco, the tiny S was punched multiple times, sometimes overlapping in a tiny crescent of misaligned letters. You'll find that the mint mark appears etched more than once, giving a blurry, doubled look, almost as if someone stamped it without centering the punch. Then there are broad strikes and off-center issues where the collar failed to confine the planchet properly, allowing the blank to expand beyond the die. These can produce half-moon crescents of unstruck bronze framing the design, most dramatic when the memorial's pillars appear to float mid-air. What does such rarity mean at auction? Even heavily worn 1969 DDO cents can pull in $150 to $250, simply because the doubling is so pronounced. As you climb the grade scale, prices soar. A well-preserved -55 Australian dollars example might trade for $800, and uncirculated MS-63 coins often break the $2,500 mark. At the pinnacle stands the MS-65 RB specimen that sold recently for around $25,000 to an advanced collector keen on adding the finest known example to their set. Meanwhile, the Holy Grail, the elusive 1969 SDDO proof penny, has no firm registry total, but surviving pieces in PR 67 condition have fetched upwards of $10,000 when they surface, often trading privately rather than at public auction. Beyond dollars and cents, these pennies carry stories worthy of display. One dealer recalls a retired postal worker who discovered a battered 1969 DDO wrapped in a faded bank strap, the doubling nearly camouflaged by years of handling until a fresh cleaning revealed its secret. Another tale tells of a small-town museum that mounted a traveling exhibit of Lincoln's mistakes, spotlighting everything from brockage to clipped planchets, only to find its most dramatic exhibit was the memorial doubling from '69. And one lucky enthusiast stumbled upon both a DDO and an off-center broadstrike in the same bank roll, an improbable 1 in 10 million coincidence that still has collectors shaking their heads. Condition remains the chief determinant of value. In well-worn grades, heavy circulation can obscure doubling and clip away mint mark detail, capping value around $100. Mid-range UNC examples, MS-60 to MS-62, with modest bag marks but strong luster often command $1,500 to $3,000. From MS-63 to MS-64, prices accelerate quickly. These are the coins that deliver eye-popping, wow factors under a loop. By MS-65, you're in elite territory, and any marginal improvement can translate to five-figure jumps. Off-center broadstrikes follow a similar pattern. A 5% clip might sell for $50, while a dramatic 30% off-center specimen can soar to $500 or more, especially if the memorial design remains sharply struck. When you roll through your pocket change or visit a local coin shop, remember that 1969 wasn't just another year for Lincoln cents, it was a crossroads of striking innovation and glitchy minting that produced some of the hobby's most enchanting rarities. Each double cheekbone and each misaligned mint mark tells a story of machinery at the brink of human oversight, immortalized in a 1-cent piece. For anyone willing to pause, peer closely, and appreciate those tiny details, the 1969 penny offers a thrilling glimpse of history stamped in bronze.